Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, I thought it prudent that we should cover the ongoing tensions between Venezuela and Guyana. So, if we look at the map, you can clearly see, obviously, the borders of Venezuela. You can see that there is a dash line that separates Guyana from Venezuela. That means this border is disputed. So, what area specifically is Venezuela claiming? Well, it's this area here. It's roughly 2/3 of the entire nation of Guyana. It is the area to the west of the Essequibo River. And hopefully I am saying that correctly. So you can see that of the 800,000 souls that live in Guyana, again, I'm tracing out the borders with my cursor. Of the 800,000 people, most live to the east of that region, of that disputed region. This here is the disputed region, roughly 2/3 of the entire nation state of Guyana. Now, about 200,000, 250,000 Guyanans call this area home. Now, recently, Venezuela had a plebiscite, had a national referendum on the status of the region in question. And most Venezuelans, according to the regime, the Marxist socialist regime that controls Venezuela, voted to essentially, it is a vote to take control of this region. Now, Maduro, the president of Venezuela, has really backed himself into a corner. Anytime you are an authoritarian regime, the likes of which we see in Venezuela, and you have a vote, and you claim that your citizens are demanding that this territory is part of Venezuela, that would lead that authoritarian regime to respond, to act, to take action. So what does that look like? Well, obviously the Venezuelan military is much larger than that of the nation state of Guyana. Guyana, again, 800,000 people live in Guyana, 30 million plus live in Venezuela. The Venezuelan military exceeds over 100,000 personnel. The Guyanan military, on paper, is about 3,000 to 4,000 personnel. They essentially have a special forces company, and then they have one infantry battalion. There are presidential security forces, paramilitary forces, very little heavy weaponry, mostly light arms, machine guns, a few mortars, a few man-portable surface-to-air missile systems, and essentially that is it. The Venezuelans, on the other hand, can field approximately 100,000 ground forces. That includes their army, their paramilitary National Guard, their naval infantry forces. The Venezuelan Navy, obviously, is much bigger than the essentially non-existent Guyanan military. The Venezuelans have 2 submarines. They have an assortment of frigates, about 6 frigates, and some amphibious landing capabilities as well. Now, the challenge for Venezuela is really the lack of infrastructure on the western bank of the Essequibo River. If we look at this area, it is essentially mostly jungle, forests, subtropical, low-lying forests with lots of rivers. really difficult for both parties to move large amounts of forces into this region. Now, what would a Venezuelan military operation look like? Well, it would probably involve the naval forces of Venezuela. Venezuela would have to deploy civilian, merchant, marine assets as well to deploy forces against Guyana. One would argue that Venezuela could make a move directly on the capital of Georgetown. At least they would look at deploying riverine forces, brownwater naval assets near the Essequibo River and take control of this river area. Now, again, Venezuela doesn't have the largest navy in the world. Its capabilities of operating in this area are really hampered by the terrain. Now, obviously, Venezuela has jungle battalions. They have essentially an entire brigade's worth of designated jungle troops trained to operate in terrain much like this, multiple battalions. Now, where Venezuela is going to have difficulty is in its air mobile assets, its ability to transport troops and materiel via helicopter, via aircraft, into some of these very isolated regions to take control over it. And I have to wonder if, in fact, it would even be, if in fact it would look like a true military invasion. I'm not sure it would. I'm not sure how a Guyana would even have the capability of resisting the Venezuelan military. I don't believe at this point Guyana has any sort of capability to defend itself against even Venezuela using, let's say, proxy forces, proxy paramilitary type of forces, much like we saw in the early stages of the 2014 Russian takeover of Crimea. Could they use that sort of blueprint? I don't know. But I do know Guyana would have much less in terms of capability to defend itself than even what we saw in the early stages of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, because Guyana is just so small. Now, we have to look at external actors. We have to look at the United States. We have to look at Brazil. Brazil has declared that it would come to the aid of Guyana. Now, what would that aid look like? Would Brazil risk a full-on military engagement with Venezuela over this disputed territory? Could the Brazilians provide enough assets to help defend Guyana? And I would have to say I'm not sure. I don't think the Brazilians have the capability to move large amounts of forces towards Guyana to help defend Guyana, especially given some of the capabilities that the Venezuelan military possesses. Now, the second actor is the United States. The United States, beyond a shadow of a doubt, could move a carrier battle group into the region, and if the United States chooses to stop a Venezuelan takeover of this territory, the United States could very easily do so. It would not be a great effort. The United States could very quickly destroy the 20 or so Venezuelan Su-30s that they possess, the few dozen or so operational older F-16s that the Venezuelans possess. The United States could very quickly sink all six of, or essentially the entire Venezuelan Navy within a matter of hours. It would not be a difficult operation for the United States. Obviously more difficult for the Brazilians, not so much for the United States. So I think at this point, Maduro has really, the leader of Venezuela, has put himself in a position where there are not a lot of good outcomes for him. I'm not sure he has thought this process out very closely. I believe he believes that the United States will not take action if he decides to move into Western Guyana. Now, again, when I say he's backed himself into a corner, he has allowed this plebiscite, this referendum to occur, and then he has acknowledged that his population is demanding that he take action against Guyana. So if he doesn't take action against Guyana, there's going to be a backlash. If he does take action against Guyana, there is a very good risk that the United States could involve itself in this conflict. There's a very good risk that Brazil may involve itself in this conflict. I would say at this point, it's safer to say that the United States may involve itself in the conflict. Because again, it would not be a big deal for the United States to prevent Venezuela from taking military action or whatever action the Venezuelans are thinking of taking, to then prevent that from actually coming to fruition. So we're going to watch this again very closely. Again, I believe that there has been a great miscalculation by Maduro. Again, he has set up a situation in which he can't win either way. If he doesn't take action, there is going to be backlash. And that backlash is going to be from his supporters. Obviously, the opposition, some of the opposition actually is in favor of and believes that this western portion of Guyana belongs to Venezuela. But again, if he doesn't take action, he's going to have egg on his face. If he does take action and the United States intervenes, and the United States could intervene, and the United States will be able to prevent Venezuela from taking this area. Now, if Venezuela does act, and because we have such a weak presidential administration right now in the form of Joseph Biden, it's, I would say, also likely, because of the spineless fool that is in the White House, given the fact that he may not take action, given the fact that many of his Hollywood donors, big donors to the Democratic Party, actually support the socialist regime in Venezuela. The Democratic Party in the United States gravitates more towards the type of government in Venezuela. So there's that card. There is that issue in which some of these Hollywood elites support Venezuela, would offer pushback against a Biden administration action to prevent Venezuela from taking Guyana. Or maybe they say nothing. Difficult to say. But we're going to continue to watch this very, very closely. As always, thank you for joining us. More to come very, very soon. Have a good day.